Alright, so for my Chapter 3 video summary, or not Chapter 3, my third video summary, you look at legal versus ethical liability, a crisis of leadership and culture. And it's really interesting. The guy talks about college sports, which is relevant to a lot of us who go to Defiance, because most of the school is athletes, which I'm not anymore, but I used to be. And it was a pretty interesting video to see all the statistics and stuff that he brings into it. But he starts off by saying that 98% of employees have reported unethical behavior at work, and that's based off of a study done by Harvard, so it's probably pretty accurate. I don't remember hearing him say that there was hearing the sample size of it, but I'm sure it was pretty big. Harvard's going to do a good study because it's Harvard. And he said that it's only getting worse. He says it's a serious problem, and that since 1998 to 2011, that number of people reporting unethical behavior at work has doubled. So, and it's still continuing to get worse. So here soon it's probably going to be 100% if everyone was honest about it. So he goes into saying that bullying is a form of unethical behavior, and that 27% of employees report being direct targets of bullying in a workplace. 72% have witnessed this bullying, and that 72% of employees try to justify this type of behavior. Or employers, not employees. So what he's saying is higher up management people try to justify this bullying type behavior where they come at people for who knows what, something that made the boss mad, they get mad about, and they're saying that this outright calling out, being rude, cussing at your employees, being terrible is justified for some reason. He didn't actually say the reasons that the employers use to justify these actions, but that can't be right. In my opinion, there's always a better way to handle things than cussing and screaming at people. I understand getting mad. Everyone gets mad and they lose their temper. But if that's something that an employer does, they need to approach said employee and talk to them calmly and tell them that they are sorry, that they shouldn't have reacted that way. But I can almost guarantee you most people aren't going to do that. They're going to try and justify their actions, whether that be out of guilt or they truly believe that. Most people will probably try and justify that, and the stats show that because, like I said, 72% of employers have tried to justify this behavior. He said a lot of people will actually not step up and report these actions, so that number could potentially be higher than what it's showing. Some people are afraid to report on things like this because of possible repercussions of saying things like this. And so then continuing on, employers spend 15%, also known as 7 weeks, of their time dealing with unethical behavior in a year. And 15%, some people in their mind might not think that's too high, but truth of the matter is that's way too high. And if it was dealing with it as in eliminating it, that's still a problem, because we can't have 15% of a boss's time, or a manager, whatever the position of authority may be, being spent getting their employees or committing these actions themselves. 15% of their time can't be spent doing that. That is way too much time. Think how much, if that number was 0, which is probably never going to be realistic because of the world, but think if that was 0%, that's 7 more weeks out of the year that someone could be spending working on things that could actually benefit the company and benefit even just themselves, becoming a better person or whatever. So, not all actions like this are legal, but most things are actually, or are illegal, but most things are actually legal, and no part of that seems right. It doesn't seem like you should be able to just belligerently attack an employee for making a mistake, or even if, I don't know, I just feel like you're in a business setting. If there was another company around, you probably wouldn't be acting like that. So you probably shouldn't act like that if there's not another company around. Say you have a customer in the office. Are you going to scream and freak out and cuss at one of your employees? No. You're going to be more calm and probably take them aside and talk to them. So I think a good policy for a lot of companies would be to just use that idea like there's always a customer in the office and you shouldn't be having as much trouble possibly if that's really the policy that a company was to live by. So ethical liability is much harder to deal with than legal. That makes sense. He pulls up I don't really know what to call it, but a picture. There's the example with the hurdles and legal liability being a lower hurdle, and ethical liability with the dude just sitting there staring straight up at it because it's harder to get over. Legal, like he said, is kind of on you. If you make a legal mistake, then that could probably just be negligence. You should have been paying better attention. You shouldn't have been making the mistakes you were. But ethical liability is a lot harder to deal with because ethical views can be very opinionated and some people might not agree with it, but there's right and there's wrong. So people got to figure out what in their company is going to be considered ethical and not ethical and make sure that that aligns up with other companies. So as a leader, you're responsible to react to unethical behavior, and you're supposed to be able to identify this behavior. And until leaders are able to identify this behavior and stop it and figure out a way to properly deal with unethical behavior, then it's probably not going to stop, because unethical behavior, like he says, unethical behavior left untreated just leads to more unethical behavior because you got away with it once, so why couldn't you get away with it again? That's kind of the policy that I think a lot of people think of and stuff like this. So he points out that college sports is terrible for unethical behavior. So he lists things like Jerry Sandusky and a lot of other coaches, like in college basketball, paying athletes, which that could be in just more than college basketball. I'm sure that it is, but all of these things, they're terrible. They're not good. And being college athletes, for a lot of us, that's something you got to think about, that while we're at a Division III school, and I bet it's not nearly as bad or at all relevant in Division III, we're still college athletes, and this is something that's closer to us and something that we should understand the problems behind. So leaders set examples for ethics, and they need to be the people who are stepping forward and showing a good example and being a good example for the rest of their company. Otherwise, these actions aren't going to stop. And so some employees will see unethical behavior, whether that be in employees or bosses. A lot of times these unethical behaviors can be making money, but it's probably not making money in the right way. So a lot of these people who actually do step up and say something about these problems end up getting in trouble and feel the consequences, whether that's bullying or fired or anything. They're probably the people actually feeling the consequences. So what we need to do is celebrate the people who do step up and say something, like he says in the video, and keep in mind that legal does not mean ethical. Thanks.